This will probably be the last one for the holidays, but you never know. Um, Today we're going to do something a little different. I'm not going to be talking so much spiritual stuff. I'm just going to be sharing a simple family Christmas story of, I think, what was probably the most memorable Christmas in my life. The funny thing about it is I don't have a single picture of the time. This was the Christmas of 1977. I was back from my first semester in college. No, it would have been 78. I'm sorry, I stand corrected. I was coming back from my first full year plus a semester in college in 78 after a year where I'd learned a lot about life that I hadn't experienced in Idaho Falls, Idaho as a child. That ties with the picture on the left. There I am a few years before the time we're going to talk about. I don't know if you can spot who is me in this rather unhappy looking family. I was back for a Christmas vacation after a year in which I didn't go try to find work during the summer because my dad was following his dream of building a house out in the country, having himself some land. We'd grown up living in town in kind of a cookie cutter neighborhood that frankly had been going downhill. I don't know, I could talk on and on about my childhood as most people could. I'm going to try to keep it focused, though, on the Christmas story. But in general, Christmas stories have to have a little background, so we'll give you a little background from the first picture. There I am with my 3 brothers and 1 sister. One of the traditions my folks always had was for Christmas cards every year, they wouldn't go out and buy Christmas cards like most people and write something inside or whatever. They would have a picture Christmas card made. And we'd all pose for a picture, sometimes with the parents, sometimes just the kids. And that was their tradition until it became impossible to do anymore. And that kind of ties in with why there probably isn't a photo of this special Christmas that I remember. The last time they got everybody together for a family photo, which was some years later after the Christmas that I'm going to talk about, let's see, I think most of the kids were married at that point, except for Dirk, the little boy, sitting between our oldest brother and me. And I guess without exception now, all of those kids, all of the wives that were in the picture at that time have been separated from the family through divorce, one way or another. My parents used to try to replace them with a new spouse. I mean, this is a good example of how innocent deep fakes can be. They first substituted out, I'm going to do a little pointing here. I don't know if you can't see my pointer, but on the far other side from the big brother, there's my next older brother, Paul. The first substitution from this picture was my sister's first husband, Fred. Fred was a real loser, and they divorced. I don't think their marriage lasted more than a year. Luckily, she quickly found the love of her life and has since had 8 children with David. David Stonehill, you are a wonderful husband and father. And Patrice is a wonderful mother. as you will find if you go to her Facebook page, because all you can find when you go visit her page is pictures of her family having fun together. The next subtraction from that family picture was the first wife of my brother Paul, right above my sister, Martha, with whom he had all of his children, I think, at least all the ones I'm aware of. Pretty good family in all. My brother Paul and I didn't get along so well. In fact, at one point, let's see, what are some of the high points of our relationship? There was a time that he was so mad at me, he was chasing me downstairs, and I closed the downstairs door really quick, and he ended up putting his fist through it. That's how rough boys play. Later on, there was a time where we went to the family, the picnic of my dad's company, yearly summer picnic, and back in those days, company picnics were kind of wild affairs. Beer was flowing freely, people were having a good time, and folks didn't really notice much if the kids snuck over to the beer keg and sampled. And I thought, well, I'm going to go see what everybody's having so much fun with this beer stuff. And I got good and stinking drunk at that summer picnic. When we got home, I was having a good time still. My brother Paul came in with his current girlfriend, and I started making passes at her. And that made my brother pretty mad, as you might guess. He decked me, and it was lights out for the rest of the night. Yeah, Paul and I didn't get along too well. We were never on the same wavelength. Let's see. Now, Dirk, he eventually got married to a Korean gal who had come over, been adopted as kind of a war orphan by a very liberal couple who wanted to show the world how much they cared about all of the orphans in Korea. They spoiled this girl rotten, and she spoiled their marriage. She was a spendthrift, constantly getting my little brother Dirk to spend money he didn't have, trying to please her, and to the point where they got so desperately poor and in debt that they had asked for a bailout from my parents. Shortly after that, she divorced him and went and found a better sugar daddy. And Dirk survived the experience and went on to find a wonderful woman he's married to now. He's become a father to her son. He's got one by his first marriage. A really wonderful kid named Max, who at last I ran across him, he was in the military somewhere. I don't know. He's probably doing something different now. I haven't heard from him in a long time. And as far as I know, my little brother Dirk's real happy still. The last marriage to fall by the wayside, well, okay, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Then comes me. My first marriage went south. Well, for the reason that most marriages do. People just grow in different directions. When we met, my first wife had been a Buddhist and had kind of grown up in the sex, drugs, and rock and roll culture of California and Arizona of her youth. And me as, the goody-goody kid from Idaho that, ate all his spinach and cleaned his plate and tried to please his parents by going to school to get a degree in physics instead of pursuing what he was really interested in, which was maybe history or archaeology or, I don't know, I had a lot of interest when I was young, classical music, etc., etc. She was the first woman that I'd ever been able to talk to for more than a while and would listen to me and not think I was kind of crazy for having all the weird interests and weird ideas I had. Well, that wore off pretty quickly. We talked nonstop the first night we met, and by the time we divorced, we weren't talking much at all. We were just on the different wavelength, kind of like me and my brother Paul, and we went separate ways, and we raised two wonderful kids who I'm hoping will make me a grandparent soon. One of them is working on it. And I went on to marry again twice. On the right, you see my current wife, wonderful lady from Indonesia, and our son, Mikhail. The last marriage to fall by the wayside, while we're talking about this picture before I get into, see, I have a tendency to drift, don't I? My oldest brother, Peter, who was my mentor growing up. He's the one who gave me my love of classical music, my love of mythological tales, classical scholarship, history. A very, very great inspiration to me. I think I'm the only one who would say that. At this point, he's pretty much alienated everybody that ever loved him. And I don't know, he and his wife stayed together for the longest time, and now they're in the process of a divorce that never seems to finish. Last I heard, they're still trying to sort out the last detail of the last thing, with Peter hanging on for whatever to the last shred of humanity, I guess. None of his kids will talk to him. His soon-to-be ex, or now ex, I don't know what the latest story is, won't talk to him. None of the rest of his family talked to him. I think I'm the last one who had any contact with him. And I had to break off contact too, because he is so far off in the weeds of human experience that no one can deal with him. At any rate, I think that's a good lead up to this special Christmas I want to tell you about, the Christmas of 1978. Now, as I mentioned, that summer before, after the end of my first college year studying physics, I decided to offer my services to my dad, who was building his dream house and had been saving up vacation for years because he wanted to build his own house. That was one of his dreams, to build this house in the country. And, you know, everybody knew that, and everybody thought he was crazy because he wasn't really much of a handyman. He wasn't very good at doing stuff like that, even though he liked to tinker around with things. He was a nuclear chemist by profession, by training, and a bridge player by expertise. He was one of the best bridge players, I think, in the world at his prime. Anyway, he had this dream to build a house. And I thought, what am I going to do for the summer? Do I want to go out and find a job? And I thought, well, I could do that, but I wouldn't make that much money in a summer job. And coming in from Seattle, I don't know, I'd be kind of coming late to the party and get the sloppy seconds of whatever summer jobs were available. And so I decided, you know what? It would make sense for me to just see if my dad would want to make a deal here. I said, so I told him, you know what? You're going to be building this house. You need some help. I will devote all my time that you want to helping you build this house if you'll pay for my college for the next year. And that's the deal we made. And it worked out pretty well. 3 or 4 days a week, I would go out. We would get up, at the crack of dawn, like 4 or 5 a.m., drive the truck out from town, and go out and work on his house. He was building a log house where you could basically design the house you wanted and get the logs delivered. They were like pre-cut logs where, imagine, a round log with a little indent cut out of it so it could fit on the next log. Kind of like, a little bit like Lincoln Logs, if you remember that toy. And you cut these things down to size. They had special ones for the end that had a little cut so you could lay it over another log, and pretty easy thing to put together. We worked all summer on that house, and he continued working after I went back to college. By the time winter hit, they had half the roof up. Turns out the inside work goes a lot slower than the outside work. We mostly finished the walls, the outside walls, when I had to go back to college, and had started putting up the roof, and that's where things kind of really slowed down, doing the inside finishing and doing the roof. So this Christmas of '78 was one of the coldest ones that I've ever experienced, which is why actually I thought of this Christmas because a lot of the country, the U.S., is experiencing the same kind of Christmas now, just brutally cold weather. A lot of snow. We didn't have a lot of snow that winter, but it was brutally cold. Typical day during that Christmas was minus 61 with the wind chill factor in a half-finished house where the wind chill really mattered. And the memory of that holiday was how the family would try to get closer to the wood stove. In the kitchen, and Mama would kind of be working, fixing up meals and working near the kitchen stuff. The kitchen was pretty well finished at that point, so she was able to do a pretty good job of making stuff for us. And there was a TV in the next room, so you could kind of watch TV if you could get a good look at it from over somebody else in the family. But mostly we were concerned about staying warm. And the funny thing about it was that, as you could kind of see from the faces of this family, there were a lot of relationships there that were not that great. Between my oldest brother and my second brother, there was a lot of enmity. Famous memory of those two was they got into it so bad once that my dad had to step between them, break them apart, and it ended up breaking my oldest brother's nose, which I think he never forgave him for. And that's why he ended up changing his name to Trump instead of Trump, which at the time, was kind of slapping my dad's face, but later on, I don't know, maybe became part of his mythos when Old Donald became very famous later on. Weird how these things work. There was a lot of enmity, as I already told you, between me and my second brother, because he kind of took out his frustrations he had with his older brother against me, kind of kicking the can down the road, if you will. And the younger kids, well, they were kind of the ones that got the benefit of all the learning of the elder ones. I remember playing a lot with them, having a good time, being part of their fantasy games and stuff like that. They turned out pretty good, as in general. And I think I was the last one. I kind of broke the mold. I didn't kick the can down to my little brother. I didn't mistreat him. Now, there was a bigger age difference there, so that's probably explaining it more than anything else. But, kind of broke the cycle of hate and conflict, if you will, with my childhood. That Christmas, we were basically jockeying around for position, trying to get along with each other in much closer contact than we'd been forced to for a long time. And to be perfectly honest, I think we became closer as a family during that really cold, miserable, horrible Christmas of '78 than the family's been ever since. That's why it was so hard for my folks to assemble anybody for Christmas for a family picture. Nobody really wanted to be there at the same time as the other siblings. I didn't want to be there mostly because I don't like being around a whole bunch of people. And I still had a fair amount of enmity to my brother Paul. But mostly it was about I just didn't like being around a lot of people. I'm not a very public person, which those of you who've known me since I started acting back in, what would have been about 2003, 2002. People wouldn't believe that I was that shy and retiring and I didn't like being around people or in big groups. Most folks don't know that about me. Think that I'm just the life of the party, Mr. Always On. And I can be that when I have to be as an actor. And I actually miss that now that I don't act anymore. Maybe I get a little bit by doing these podcasts, by doing the singing I do on Star Maker. I've got a nice little following of folks that like my voice and like to hear my songs and listen for the little changes I make to the song because I don't like the lyrics. The song I'm most unhappy with, in a happy way, is a little song called Imagine by, did John Lennon write that? I think he did write it and perform it. Well, the lyrics of that song are really dark and negative. It's a communist song, and I don't like communists, as I've told you. So I change it around a bit. Imagine all religions is one of the changes I make to that because I am absolutely a supporter of religious freedom. I don't agree with everybody, and I will piss off a lot of religious people with what I tell them on my channel. I don't mind doing that. I don't mind them being angry with me because that's what religious freedom is all about. Ties in with freedom of speech. Freedom to be different. Now that's real freedom. To accept somebody else as being different as long as they don't get in your way. Now this is where the problem with my brothers happened. They got in each other's way. They wouldn't be satisfied to accept and tolerate each other. And it's as I've told you, it's a tough line sometimes. I got in my brother's way, and I absolutely deserved to be decked for flirting with his girlfriend when I was drunk after that party. I'm not sure what I did to piss him off when he put his hand through the door, the basement door, but probably it was something that I deserved some punishment for. There was another time I remember I'd gotten, maybe another Christmas, I'd gotten the neatest gift I'd ever gotten. It was a sailboat, a big sailboat that had real sails, and it was like, maybe about 2 feet tall. And I really loved that sailboat. Actually, there were 2 boats in this story. There was another time I got a submarine, an electronic submarine that had a motor and a little system where you could make it go up and down with a pump, which at the time was pretty high technology back in the 70s. And in both those cases, my brother Paul decided, well, those aren't done right. The sailboat doesn't work the way it's supposed to. I'm going to fix it so it will work like a sailboat is supposed to. I'm going to fix the submarine so it will work like it's supposed to. And he ended up destroying them. And I never forgave him for that, for destroying some of my favorite toys, because he thought he knew better than the toy maker how it was supposed to be put together. And I still haven't forgiven you for that, Paul. You stepped on my space without asking me, without so much as a by your leave, just because you were my big brother and you thought you knew everything. So, if you'd ever like to talk to me again, get back in good with your brother, I'd like you to apologize for destroying my toys. Is that too much to ask? And I will apologize for all the times that I've been nasty and mean and unreceptive to your big ideas. Because it's something that you keep on doing is imposing your big ideas on everyone else. And that is tyranny. This is the cardinal karmic sin that I talk about. And I'm not going to forgive you for that until you admit it. And you admit that that is what soured our relationship. So that's my Christmas message to my brother Paul. My Christmas message to my brother Peter is, grow a heart. You may be the smartest person in the world. You may have read the most books. You may be able to quote Swedenborg and Rajneesh and every other guru that you ever thought had a good idea. But you've forgotten the most important part of being a human is your own personal experience and learning from it. And you need to look back in your life at your experience and see what you've done wrong, because you've driven everybody who ever loved you away from you. And that's got to signal you're doing something wrong. Very, very wrong. So you need to ask your whole family for forgiveness. And stop being such a Grinch, especially around Christmas. Do I have a message for my little sister? Keep on keeping on. If you ever get frustrated with all the balls you have to keep in the air because you got 8 kids and now they're on to having their kids, and soon you're going to have more grandkids probably than you can handle, and remember the names of, this is the bed that you've made, and you lay in it, and I think you are. I've never heard my little sister complain that she didn't have time for herself, that she didn't have time for her husband. I've never heard her husband complain either, so maybe this is the way they like life. It's not a life I would like. It's not a life I could live with, but that just shows that every individual is different, has different needs, has different desires, has different aspirations. So, Patrice, you're doing a great job. Do I have a message for my little brother Dirk? It's been a while since we've talked. I was really, really touched that you came to my son's wedding and that you've tried to stay in touch with the family. I know you're real busy with whatever you're doing. I'm glad you're back from Saudi Arabia. I don't think that was a very healthy place for you to make your fortune. But I hope you did make a fortune there, and you're in better shape financially than you were when you took the decision to go to Saudi Arabia. I hope that's been a real learning experience for you over there. Talking about today's Christmas, do I have a message for my wife? Yeah, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. She's an incredible person who has her own challenges, and we have challenges as a couple, but we're working through them. And the best thing about this Christmas is seeing how our relationship has sort of made her family come back to life. Her family has not been real close for a long time, and I've never seen a family heal as quickly and as completely as I've seen her family heal since this crazy Dutchman came into it. She and her mother are like children together. And that's the way parents should be able to be with their kids. Having fun, laughing, being silly, not in each other's faces all the time. Yeah, they still have arguments, but it's so heartwarming to see her and her mom that when we met, she swore she'd never want to speak to her mom again, never want to see her again. For reasons I'm not going to get into now. Aya doesn't like me to talk a lot about her personal life, but that's a blessing. Mikhail is certainly a blessing. He is the most beloved little child any family ever had, and the only thing that worries me is we're going to spoil the hell out of him, so I'm working hard to be the tough loving parent as hard as I can. But that little guy is going to be somebody special. I don't know who. Maybe we've kind of poisoned his future by giving him... I didn't pick out the name Mikhail, actually. The funny thing was that Aya picked that name out, although she had been planning to name him Nathan. Now, I'm not sure where those names fit in. We're in an Islamic country, and we are an Islamic family. I have had to become a Muslim in order to marry her because that's the law in Indonesia. I am an omnist Muslim, which means I can be an omnist Christian too, and I can be an omnist Greek God worshiper, and I can be an omnist whatever, an omnist Hindu. I can be at sometimes an omnist Buddhist, although I reserve a lot of my commentary, my admonishment for Buddhists and similar religions of what I consider self-deception. At any rate, I'm not going to start preaching here, but little Mikhail has an interesting story that I'll tell you. If you know anything about prophecy, one of the odd prophecies that you'll run across is that the Archangel Michael is going to come back in the end times, is going to get to be human, have a normal life. And this will be one of the signs. And I just hope his life isn't as short as some of the stories predict, because I'd like to enjoy this little child for a while longer. Whatever happens is going to happen, and I'm going to be satisfied with a very wonderful life and a very wonderful place that I've gotten to in it. And as you ponder what's going on this Christmas, I hope you will take the time to look back and glory in how far you've come, how far this world has come. Think about where we were just 100 short years ago, just coming out of a world war that was the most horrific experience that soldiers ever remembered. Chemical warfare. Thousands of people being mowed down by mortars and machine guns, weapons that had never existed before. And then World War II. Well, the Great Depression, too. My dad lived through that, and he told me a lot about it. And World War II. I heard a lot about World War II from my mom. Not so much from my dad. He enlisted the day that he was old enough, the day he turned 18, wanted to join the Navy. Joined the Navy, and I think 2 days later, the Japanese surrendered. he caught rheumatic fever and ended up spending his whole tour in hospital. But he got his share of the experience because he was one of the witnesses of the first H-bomb explosion in Wetuck Island. Never talked about it much, except he would say that, they told us all to hide our heads and close our eyes, shield before the thing happened. And he said, I didn't follow their instructions. I opened my eyes when it was happening, and I could see my bones through my flesh. And that's all he would ever say about that experience. My mom grew up in France. Her dad was an American soldier. Not really American, he was a Norwegian American who had been born in Norway, moved to America with his family, went to war in France, and decided to stay and marry a French girl. Well, when the Nazis decided to end the Vichy Republic and occupy all of France, they were in the south part of France, and he decided, you know what, based on what we've been hearing from folks about what happens when the Nazis come, it's entirely possible because we have dual U.S. French citizenship that we could come under persecution, even though we aren't Jewish, or perhaps aren't obviously Jewish, because there's a lot of people in Europe who do have Jewish blood, who are maybe more Jewish than the people who call themselves Jews today. This is one of the mysteries of European history, Middle Eastern history. At any rate, they left after some very harrowing experiences. The most memorable experience my mom left with me was one of a time where her little sister, her youngest sister, was very, very ill, and she was sent out to get medicine for this little sister. Had to go to the pharmacy, apothèque, or whatever they called it in French, and across the town, and she took her friend with her, her best friend. Well, a German tank convoy was coming through town at that time, and wouldn't stop for anybody. They were on their way somewhere important. So her and her friend, to get across the street to get to the drugstore, had to find a way between these tanks, which were pretty close together in this convoy. My mother made it through. Her best friend didn't. She saw her best friend killed, trampled, run over by a tank. The Nazis didn't even stop, didn't even look back. They came to the U.S. by way of Portugal, with barely the clothes on their backs, and on a ship that was lucky not to have been torpedoed. They arrived on Ellis Island without a cent to their name. I don't know what happened to my grandfather's family, and he died shortly after. I never really knew him. Which I understand was a great loss, because he was, according to everybody I know, a hell of a person. They eventually ended up in California, where she and my dad became high school sweethearts. And they, after the war, married and were together ever since. And I'm not sure if any of the rest of the family knows this, but my dad, maybe because I'd spent this summer building the house with him, we got really close during that time. He told me, actually, Maybe also the downside of that was somehow he named me the executor of his will, and he died before my mom, and I tried to execute that will, and that's one of the things that created the most angst in my family, because everybody thought I was trying to take their inheritance when all I was trying to do was disposition this huge stamp collection that he had and try to find a lawyer like I was supposed to manage the estate. And he told me, whatever you do, make sure that your mom is taken care of and she doesn't have to worry about financial issues because she doesn't know how to manage money and she is too generous. Long story short, my siblings ganged up against me. They got my mom to disavow my dad's will and make a new one, and I eventually got my share of the estate. Don't get me wrong, they didn't do anything that was unfair. What they did do, though, is put my mother right in the center of what she shouldn't have been involved in, which I think accelerated her death. Less than a year later, she was touched up for something on the order of $50,000, $60,000 by a good-for-nothing nephew who was a drug addict and gambler, sports trainer in California who was addicted to the high life and a number of other things. Cousin Harold, very disturbed individual, borrowed all this money, and less than a year later he was dead. And I guess we're just fortunate that more of the family's savings wasn't frittered away like that. At any rate, that's one side of it. The other, where I was leading with this is before he died, my dad told me that, you know what? It was really hard being married to your mom. There were many times we nearly divorced. We hid it from you kids. And it actually got so bad that we nearly divorced at the end because my mom was starting to have dementia. And my dad had all kinds of very, very painful health problems resulting from his exposure to radiation. He at one point got a check for about $300,000 from the government because he happened to be one of the people that was involved in an incident. I don't know, maybe it was this Eniwetok H-bomb explosion. A bunch of people got compensated by the government. He'd never activated. He was the most patriotic person in the world. He was glad to serve his country in any which way he could. And he didn't blame the government for his problems, but he didn't look a gift horse in the mouth. He took the $300,000 and never really made a big deal of it. While many of his compatriots were still trying to get more and complaining that, trying to tie every health problem they had back to something that they could blame the government for, or, kind of like happened with a lot of the soldiers after Vietnam. Now, maybe they were right, maybe they were wrong. That's neither here nor there. It's a matter of what you do with things. Whether you take personal responsibility, how you deal with other people who aren't taking responsibility. At any rate, the long and the short of it was that their marriage, although it was to all purposes maybe the best marriage that I'd never known, the most well-matched couple, the happiest couple for the longest period of time I'd ever known, it wasn't perfect. And if I'm going to give you with one thought, people aren't perfect. You're not perfect. And because you're not perfect, no one else is going to be perfect for you. So as you spend your holiday season with whatever family and friends you have, just remember that you're all individuals. You all have strengths and weaknesses, and a strength is always a weakness in some other situation. You may be a person that's very proactive in doing things, very energetic in solving problems. Well, that kind of a person is going to jump into a solution without it being fully baked. That kind of person is the kind that would sign off on distributing a new drug before it had really been fully tested. Even though many of the scientists working for them said, I think we need to do some more trials. I think we need to do this. No, think of all the money we'll lose. Okay. Now, at the same time, there might be another person of that type who just happens to have a cockamamie idea that might save the whole species from an asteroid that's about to hit. And forces their way into putting that solution in practice and might just save the whole planet. There have certainly been Hollywood movies that had that theme. That's the other side of the coin. There are all different personalities because throughout creation there are all different problems. And this is why the multiverse exists. This is why there's not just one universe. If there was only one universe, then you'd only get one solution to any problem that came up. And that would not be a very good way to continue creation. No matter what is going on at any given time, there are multiple scenarios that can happen based upon the decisions that key people are making. And one of those scenarios is always going to carry the ball closer to an end zone that never ends. This is the truth of creation. It was not perfect on day 7. Anybody who thinks that is pretty naive and probably shouldn't consider a career in science. It's nonsense. God is not almighty. God is not perfect. God doesn't know everything. God doesn't see everything. This is nonsense. And if you think about it in enough depth, like many people have, you will come to that conclusion. That's why there are so many atheists in the world. Now, they are stupid because they throw out one idea completely rather than amending it. They throw the baby out, they throw the God out with the bathwater. They throw Jesus out with the manger, where the Christ story is just one of many spiritual stories of birth and adaptation. The truth is that there are special times in our history where new solutions are required. The pressure of what's going on becomes great enough that a new idea needs to come into being. Sometimes those ideas come with people, specific people. I don't know, maybe Buddha was a real person. There's some debate over that, whether the whole Buddha story was just as made up as the Jesus story or the Muhammad story. Yes, in fact, there's very little evidence that Muhammad actually existed as is fabled. Now, that doesn't mean that Islam is false. It means that it might have a different root story than we believe now. Stories change, they adapt, they evolve. That doesn't invalidate the story if it's useful. And some of the most useful stories that humanity has ever invented are supposed to exist. They're part of a plan. Because what you got to get through your thick gourd is that consciousness is the only reality. Thought is the only reality. Thought creates matter. God was the first soul, a creature, a thing with no body, a thing of pure thought, of pure identity of thought, of pure personality, who had a thought to make other thoughts that operated independently, either with programming, which is how computer engineers design computers. Well, let's make something that can do things like a human being, think like a human being, but let's give it a specific task to think about, a certain set of rules. Those things are getting more sophisticated, and we're now talking about AIs, where the programming that we give them can be altered by the program itself, self-learning. That's exactly how God became God. How God's children became real children. Like Pinocchio. Oh, there's a good movie to put on your Christmas watch list. Pinocchio is an incredibly spiritual movie. Maybe the most so of all the Disney movies ever made. So watch that. And think about it from the point of view of who is God. What is real? What is a real human? What is a real soul? I think that's probably a good point to wrap up this one. I hope you have a wonderful holiday, wonderful New Year. It's going to be interesting to see what comes from all the stuff that's going on now. I mean, there's so many threads of this reality show we're in. You don't know which one to really follow. You've got the Russia-Ukraine war. You've got the revelations about the 2022 midterms and the preceding revelations about 2020 and even as far back as 2016. And you know, there's things coming out that go back even further about what was really happening. A lot of veils are being lifted. A lot of secrets are coming out in a big way and probably in little ways as folks in families start talking again about the things that they don't usually talk about. So it's really pretty fun time to be around if you know that death is just a transition. It's not the end. It doesn't mean you'll never see your loved ones again. It does mean you'll probably never see them in the same body again. Although it is possible to reincarnate and repeat a life you've lived before. This is actually one of the best sources for the souls that come into being when we move between universes. There are other versions of you that have made other decisions at every key point where you didn't know which way to go. And, you know, if you're looking back at life and you're saying, oh, I screwed things up so much. I'm never going to. Oh, there's my wife. She's back again.
I'm almost done, babe.
That is one hell of a wife. Okay, enough kissing. They're gonna change the rating on this one. Yeah. Uh-oh, we're going blurry. I think I went out of focus too much. At any rate, it's time to wrap up. For the Omnist Hour, this is Rob Tromp. Like, share, subscribe, and I wish you a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and don't be surprised what happens as we move forward, because like I said, there are many paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on. Take care. Happy karma.